The Philadelphia Eagles look primed for a repeat, but they just made the same big mistake they made 2 years ago. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the mastermind, Ross Jackson. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at the NFC East because the Dallas Cowboys are completely boring. The New York Giants need to trade for Matthew Stafford. And we'll start with the Philadelphia Eagles, who look set to repeat, but just made the same mistake that they've made before. Before we dive in, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Ross, gonna surprise you a little bit here. All right. The Eagles hire a new offensive coordinator. I think it's a big time mistake. I know that you're watching the Eagles as well. Before we, talk about why this is such a big mistake, let my guy Legacy Louie give you the news.
Kevin Patullo would not have been my choice for the Eagles' new offensive coordinator. In-house promotions just have not worked over the years, and it's actually caused some power struggles between the Eagles' head coach and Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. I think sometimes your offense can get stale this way. I like bringing in fresh new ideas, maybe somebody that has play-calling experience. But I will say, if the Eagles' number one priority was continuity for Jalen Hurts, who's going on his sixth play caller in the NFL. He's had a play caller that's different every single year, going all the way back to his days at Alabama. If that was the number one priority that trumps everything else, then I can get behind it. Patullo did help mesh the two different offenses last year of Nick Sirianni's and Kellen Moore's. The verbiage is going to be the same. There's a lot of issues that I have with this decision, but at the same time, I do like the continuity aspect, and it looks like the players are behind this. So I don't absolutely hate it.
Okay, look, Ross, I'm sorry. I got to go back 2 years ago and say this is exactly what the Eagles did last time when they made a Super Bowl run.
Yeah.
Shane Steichen left. Jonathan Gannon left. Now you're not losing both your coordinators, but you're losing your offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore, who is a head coach level offensive coordinator. Shane Steichen, head coach level offensive coordinator. And I'm sorry, but they promoted from within. They went to Brian Johnson, and it failed miserably. The offense was terrible. So I think if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, I know that continuity for Jalen Hurts sounds enticing, but if he's had different play callers for 7 straight years or whatever, and he's still the player that he is, then obviously it's not as important as you think that it is. And this is the same mistake they made last time. I think you need to push the edge. You need to get somebody more innovative and get an outside voice to keep refreshing things for this Eagles offense. Patullo could be fine. I could be wrong, but I just think this is a big knock in the Eagles' repeat chances because it's the same mistake they failed at 2 years ago.
Yeah, the way that I look at it is you've got the best situation, one of the best situations in the NFL for an offense that you could sell to any offensive coordinator out there.
Yes.
And I was surprised to see such a limited sort of viewpoint and vantage point and pursuit when it came to finding Jalen Hurts next offensive coordinator, that outstanding offensive line's next offensive coordinator, Saquon Barkley's next offensive coordinator. Like, they have everything that they need to go out there and sell and go and get that next innovative young coach and everything like that. And maybe Patullo is that guy and we just don't know it yet. But man, there's a lot of proven quantities out there that you could have gone and pursued and brought in. And I'm with you. Seeing how successful Jalen Hurts has been with 6 different offenses in his career since going back to his Alabama days, I'm okay with changing that offense, and probably Jalen Hurts is okay with changing that offense as well. I get the desire for continuity, but in some cases, particularly when it comes to continuity on the offensive side of the football, we've watched so many teams try this. This hasn't just not worked for the Philadelphia Eagles. This has not worked consistently across the league. Go and find somebody that's proven. Go and find somebody that's promising. Bring them in as your next offensive play caller, and then see what you're able to put together in 2025.
I mean, to me, it would be like if you dunked one time. Like you
right.
You dunk one time. It's a magical moment. You were just in a perfect position. Your shoes were brand new. You had a proper warm up, blah, blah, blah. You don't need to change your entire game and say, hey, I'm going to be a high flyer now. No, you still need to work on your dribbling and your shooting. Like the Eagles had a magical moment last year where everything came together. And I think trying to think that you're going to redo that same magic again, no, you need to evolve. You need to expand. What worked for you this year is not going to get it done next year. And to me, this is going to be the big test for Nick Sirianni. I've said Nick Sirianni doesn't get enough credit for being the CEO type coach that he is. Everybody talks about Mike Vrabel and Dan Campbell and Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, but Nick Sirianni deserves to be in that discussion. But the biggest test for all of these CEO leader type coaches is your coordinator hires. It doomed Mike Vrabel in Tennessee when he lost Arthur Smith to be a head coach, replaced him with Todd Downing and Tim Kelly, his buddies, yes men, who weren't good enough for the job. We see Dan Campbell now losing his 2 head coaching level coordinators. We saw the Eagles completely collapse for 1 year because of the inability of Sirianni to hire the proper guys. And he corrected that, which he deserves credit for, which is why I think he deserves more credit, because he was able to correct that and go outside of the yes men in the building and get real talent. Mike Tomlin, I think, is somebody. They went with Matt Canada for 2 years in Pittsburgh and doomed their offense. Like these CEO level coaches, John Harbaugh, another guy. They're not scheme lords. They're not great play callers. I'm not saying they don't know either side of the ball and, they don't know scheme and stuff, but that's clearly not what they do best. And that's why the test for that style is, who can you hire? And are you willing to go outside of your comfort zone to hire the best talent available to support you where you need it most?
Yeah, one of the big things that I picked up asking and talking to Philadelphia media members about Kellen Moore is a little bit of a push and pull of how much of the offensive success was Kellen Moore's, how much of the offensive success was actually Nick Sirianni's. And so maybe a guy like Patillo offers an opportunity for you to be able to go into, 2025, and maybe Nick Sirianni's driving that offense, and it kind of clarifies the question and everything. So maybe it opens up the path for him not to be a play caller. I'm not saying that, but to remain the CEO and just have an idea of, hey, this is what I want the offense to look like. Now you go do it. And then making those different decisions that build what that offensive foundation is. But I'm going to be very curious to see if he's going to be able to do that. And if that's really what this is in terms of being able to clear out the path for him to have more of a hands-on approach over on the offensive side while it gets built in concert with the new offensive coordinator. So maybe this is either a big test for Nick Sirianni, or potentially it's a big win for Nick Sirianni, depending upon how 2025 goes. But for right now, I understand the hesitation around the outlook, even from Philadelphia fans, around where this could potentially head for their team.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen him do it before and it didn't work. So, I love our pairing here, Ross, because you're able to dive into the mind of the NFL employee and say, this is probably what Nick Sirianni is thinking. And I think you're right. That is, Nick Sirianni is thinking, yeah, 2025 is a big year for Nick Sirianni, baby. Yeah,
I know he's thinking that. 100% he's thinking that.
This Petula thing is like, you're at the Super Bowl parade, you're hammered, you're smoking a stogie around a table with your coaching staff. You put your arm around Petullo. You say,
I knew it.
You did a real good job, buddy. You did a real good job.
Good. You're so good. I'm gonna keep you around, man.
Yeah, I think I could do more, Coach. I really do. You know what? I think you can too, bro. Cheers to that. And then it's like, he should have said, "Oh no, Petullo, I was high when I said that." No, Ricky, you know what I mean? But instead, they followed through with it. And we'll see how it goes. So big reason for hesitancy with me with an Eagles repeat chance with that. But there's a lot of interest in the NFC East as well. The New York Giants, I think they need to make that trade for Matthew Stafford. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off and you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love a same-game parlay. I also love FanDuel's live betting feature that keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally, picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. And I would tell you for the foreseeable future, sadly, take the under on Luka Doncic points, it seems. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Ross, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. Talked about the Philadelphia Eagles and a mistake I think they've made here that hurts their repeat chances, but who's going to challenge them in the division? We know that the Washington Commanders are there, and we'll talk Commanders and the boring Cowboys, but I think a sneaky team that could challenge in the NFC East is the New York Giants. And before we dive in, though, just do want to thank you again for making Locked On NFL your first listen. I know right now you're thinking, Tyler, is this why they call you the Madman? What are we doing? But hear me out, Ross.
I'm literally biting my tongue.
Right. I think the Giants could make this trade for Matthew Stafford, and with the pieces they have, could become a competitive team right away. Now, what are they going to pay for Matthew Stafford? That's the question. And we go to Locked On Sports today with my guy Peter and the GOAT, Patricia Traina, talking about what that might look like.
The reporting is, well, we'd like to keep Matthew Stafford, but if we were going to part with him, it would be a first-round pick, which is normally how these things go. Let's chum the waters here. Do you think this makes sense in New York?
Not for a first-round pick. Absolutely, positively not. If that's what the Rams want, if I'm Giants general manager Joe Shane, I tell them thanks, but no thanks. Although probably he would come up with more colorful language than what's allowed on this program. Stafford for the third overall pick. No, you might as well, if that's what you're going to do, you might as well take, one of the young quarterbacks at that spot. But look, here's the thing with Stafford. He just turned 37 years old. He's had some injuries over the last few years. When he's on, he's on. When he's not, it's disastrous. He's not the long-term answer. And while I think he would be a good bridge quarterback, and I would embrace it if if a third overall pick wasn't part of the deal, I don't think I would go and give up any first-round picks for him.
Well, first and foremost, nobody's given up a first-round pick for 37-year-old Matt Stafford. That's insanity. No. Let's not play that game, and it's definitely not going to be the number 3. Now, would the Giants do number 34 overall at the top of the second round for Matthew Stafford and a third? Where you're really just dropping down 30 or so picks and getting the quarterback? Because I think the reality is that Joe Shane and Brian Daboll have to win now or they are fired. They have to field a competitive team and win some games this year or they are fired. Everybody knows it. That's why they're the number 1 team that might trade up for a quarterback. They're the only team that really makes real sense for Matthew Stafford as well, in my opinion. Maybe you throw the Steelers in there, but really I think the Giants make the most sense. And here's Andrew Thomas back healthy is one of the best left tackles in the NFL. They need some more reinforcements on the offensive line, no doubt about that. But you have Kayvon Thibodeau and you have Brian Burns on the edge with Dexter Lawrence. We just saw the Eagles with a dominant front line be able to win the Super Bowl. I think that with Matthew Stafford buoying the offense, some more pieces on the offensive line, throwing to Malik Neighbors with the D-line that they have, I honestly think that the New York Giants could be a competitive team and maybe be a playoff team next year if they were to make that move. Am I as crazy as it seems?
Not entirely, but a little bit. So the way that I look at it is, yeah, I think the Giants should make this move. And I'll add in Tyrone Tracy as kind of this versatile chess piece out of the backfield that you can also build around everything like that. And so I think the Giants should absolutely make this move. I agree that a first round pick, like every team says, oh, well, we want a first round pick for this player. And then they trade him for a fourth. Yeah. Like, of course you're going to do that.
I want $1 million a year from Locked On, Ross.
Right.
Get it
exactly.
done.
Yeah. Start there and then we'll negotiate all the way down. And so I think that the thing that we look at with that is like, okay, fine. That's fine. But the thing here is I don't think they have the ability to compete within the division. I don't think they have the ability to compete even with Matthew Stafford on the team. If I was just looking at what the roster has, I would completely agree with that. I would say, yes, adding Matthew Stafford, building up the offensive line, maybe adding another playmaker in this year's draft has a lot. You got a lot of good pieces you could add to the defensive line in this year's draft too. That, yes, if the players were the only thing that mattered, I would completely agree. Here's where that goes sideways for me. They have a bad head coach. They have a bad general manager, and they're not heading anywhere with those guys. They are not going to get anywhere with Brian Daboll. They are not going to get anywhere with Joe Schoen. And until those pieces are also changed out, I can't look at the New York Giants as being competitive. But because of that that is exactly the reason they should go and make the move for Matthew Stafford. Because you're right, this is their last chance. And the best way for them to be able to maximize their opportunity is to go and get themselves a veteran quarterback that might be able to make them look competitive and more competent than they have actually proven to be.
So I agree with everything you say on its face. If like everything, all your premises are true, I agree. But I actually don't think that Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are terrible. So that's probably why, like, I agree they've made some bad moves. They made some poor moves, like really paying Daniel Jones was the biggest mistake, I think. But, you look at, they got to the playoffs with Daniel Jones at quarterback, and they had Saquon Barkley then, and I get it, but like they had Saquon Barkley and they were terrible the year after that. So I think getting to the playoffs with a Daniel Jones, I think that Brian Daboll is actually a decent coach. Quite honestly, I think he's middle of the road. I don't think he's great. And you look at Joe Schoen, he did take Malik Neighbors, Kayvon Thibodeau, Wan'Dale Robinson.
A given situation taking Malik Neighbors.
Dane Belton's
let's not pretend player. Like that was a hugely, like, oh, what a genius. He drafted the guy he should have drafted. Like, let's not give him more credit than he deserves.
Listen, I understand that, but there are a lot of people who don't do the right thing. I guess I just think that they're more middle of the road than terrible. So I have some faith that I have more faith in Daboll than I do Schoen or what, but at the end of the day, I still think it's the right move. The question is, why would the Rams do that? Our guy Sosa, former host of Locked On Rams, shout out to him. But we had a little discussion on the interwebs, and I just do not understand. His argument was that, the Rams aren't going to win with Matthew Stafford. They need to get younger. They shouldn't pay a long-term extension or give him more money because they're not close enough to justify that. But then also said Aaron Rodgers would be a good fit. And I'm just like, I don't understand. No one could give me a logical reason as to why the Rams would trade Matthew Stafford. I just refuse to believe that it's real because it makes no sense for the Rams whatsoever. Get worse at quarterback with an older quarterback. And outside of Rodgers, what else would even make sense? Pay Sam Darnold the money that I would rather pay 37-year-old Matthew Stafford for $50 million than Sam Darnold. So I just don't understand why the Rams would do this.
Yeah, I think the only thing that could be maybe remotely logical, you can tell me, the only thing would be if they are a team that is making the concerted effort to be a year early rather than a year late on a change.
But then you don't get Aaron Rodgers. You don't go out and get Aaron
Rodgers. No, I completely agree with that. You would have to be doing it with an eye towards 2026 solving your quarterback problem. Right. Yes. You're talking about, like, in my opinion, in this case, you don't, as the Los Angeles Rams, move on from Matthew Stafford or trade Matthew Stafford away in the hopes of getting better in 2025. You do it in the hopes of grabbing draft capital so that you can prepare for your next steps starting in 2026 and maybe getting some of those pieces in place elsewhere on the roster in 2025. Don't get me wrong. Like 2025 still means something to them, but I think otherwise you're really looking at building up some capital so that you can start to make some moves in 2026. I do agree that you don't extend him, though. There's just no sense in doing that. And so the only thing really that you're looking for at this point is he the 2025 guy or not? Because he's not your guy of the future. It's just whether or not you see him as your guy of the present. So it's all about being a year early rather than a year late, which I don't know if that's the right decision or the wrong decision, but that might be what it is that they're looking at.
If they want to tank and just acknowledge that this version of the team isn't going to work and we're going to trade Kupp and we're going to trade Stafford and we're going to look to kind of transition, then play one of the young, go grab Jameis Winston or Justin Fields or something like that.
I love the Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston in Los Angeles?
Let's go. Let's go. Get him closer to Fox, too, which is where we all ultimately want him, is in a booth. Games. Right. Give me more Jameis Winston. But my ultimate point is, and I think you agree, if you want to win, You do not do this.
You're not
if you
doing
want to
it,
tank and restart, then you do it. But there is no trading Matthew Stafford and then signing Aaron Rodgers. That is the worst of both worlds and makes
just
no
keep
sense.
Matthew Stafford.
Yeah. It would be a big splash, though, to trade Matthew Stafford. And speaking of a big splash, the Washington Commanders, it's time for them to make a big move. All right, Ross, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL, talking about the NFC East, but also talking about some of the biggest stories in the NFL. The Eagles hire an offensive coordinator. I think that it was a big mistake when they made before. The Giants should make a trade for Matthew Stafford, even if it doesn't make sense for the Rams. Who cares? Take it. But now I want to talk about the Washington Commanders, because free agency is right around the corner. And not only that, but the salary cap is the other big piece of news in the NFL right now, as the salary cap has gone up $20 million. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this, Ross, because we have teams to discuss that are far more important. But I do want to say, with the salary cap, if you're a team like Ross's Saints, who is over the cap and is looking for cap relief, this is a big help to you, because now you don't have to make as many moves. You don't have to cut as many players. You don't have to restructure as many contracts. It gives you a little more room. But if you're a team with cap space that wanted to spend big in free agency, this is not good for you, because just because the cap, this is like, because you get a new job and you get a $20,000 a year raise, like that would be great. But if peanut butter and jelly and meat and eggs went up 20% every time you got a raise, you're not really getting that big of a raise.
You all got a raise,
free agents
right?
are going to want,
now it's driving everything else up. Yeah.
Right. So it helps teams that were in a bad spot, but it's really not that big of a help to teams that are in a good spot, because the players that are free agents right now, they're just going to adjust accordingly and ask for more money. So it's kind of a trade-off in that way. But moving on from that, the Washington Commanders are a team that needs to make a big move, in my opinion, and use their cap space. And whether it be a trade for a wide receiver, whether it be a trade for a splash defensive end, which there are a few that could be available, I think they need to make that move. And my guy David Harrison from Locked On Commanders talked about DK Metcalf, who could be available and would be a good fit as well.
There were a number of executives, coaches, et cetera, people in the league who anonymously told Jeremy Fowler that they believe in a poll that the Seattle Seahawks will move DK Metcalf this offseason. And while it's very interesting information, while it's certainly not nothing, it's a lot less than if it was solid intel from either the players' camp or the Seattle Seahawks themselves. And so without that is the reason we did include DK Metcalf in that conversation. Metcalf, 6'4", 236 pounds, certainly has downfield speed, just turned 27 in December, so he'll turn 28 this coming December. He is entering the final year of his contract in 2025 and is due $18 million that the Commanders would have to pay if they traded for him. Of course, if you're going to do this deal, you are likely negotiating an extension, which can move some of that money down the road a bit if they wanted to. You don't have to pay all $18 million of the cap hit this year. Metcalf is coming off of a relatively down year in 2024. It's his third season out of 6 seasons in the NFL under 1,000 yards receiving, second year in a row with 66 receptions and a career low 5 touchdown catches.
So, Ross, that really leaves 3 questions. Should the Commanders make a splash move? What side of the ball should it come on? And who should it be?
Yeah, I would say yes, they should make a splash move. This is the perfect time to do it with a rookie quarterback on a rookie contract that you know is your starter for the foreseeable future. There's no questions about
the best
Jaden
asset
Daniels, right?
in the NFL.
Yeah,
they have the best asset in the NFL right now. Period.
Yep. And then to your point, waiting to go to the open market means you're negotiating against everybody else that just got a 20% raise, trading for somebody and then negotiating with them a little bit easier when you don't have competition to potentially drive the price up. So I think a splash move via a trade makes a lot of sense. Which side of the ball should it be on? I actually think it should be on the defensive side of the football, personally. So, I like the Myles Garrett pursuit potentially there. So that's the one that I'm looking at. And then, just take a look at, how they should do it. I think doing it by trade makes a ton of sense. And I think that that's the way that they should go. And so I think it should be, in terms of who it is, I think Myles Garrett should be the person.
And as we keep the salary cap conversation relevant within this discussion, because it would go, one thing that also creates more value now is if you've signed a guy to a contract extension in the last year or so, like if you sign somebody to last year, $20 million less salary cap percentage, like, don't pay attention to the total number of like if it's 4 years, 80 million, 20 million a year. What you really need to pay attention to is what percentage of the salary cap is that average annual value. And guys who signed their contract a year ago or within the last 18 months, they're not going to get a new deal right away. So you're going to get really good value on those contracts when the cap goes up here for this season. So trading for somebody becomes even more lucrative in that regard, because it's someone who's already on a contract and a big time player, probably got their money recently. Trey Hendrickson, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby. Obviously, Micah Parsons probably not going to be an option for them, but I actually agree with you. I think you draft and develop at wide receiver because there are so many good wide receivers that come out of the draft every year. It's always a stacked position. But actually, funnily enough, this year,
defensive line's great.
And Edge is lit. So maybe they do go get, they trade for T. Higgins on the tag or DK Metcalf. Maybe that will matter. But generally, I agree with you. Speaking of Micah Parsons, though, the team that could trade him away is the Dallas Cowboys. And I think what's most crazy about the Dallas Cowboys right now, Ross, is they are so boring. We have them at the bottom of this episode, the least amount of discussion time. And the Cowboys have been a lot of things, but rarely are they boring. And my guys over at Locked On Cowboys think that has a lot to do with these Micah Parsons rumors.
It's very transparent at this point, and it's practically embarrassing at this point. I mean, it is embarrassing, right? Like, it's like, this is so obviously like a Super Bowl Sunday, Jerry trying to get his name in the newspaper situation. Like, I mean, look, again, like, we're going to continue to see more and more of this. And every single time any one of these, top of the market players becomes up and eligible for a contract, I mean, I feel like we're going to just continue to see this, right? Where maybe the Cowboys trade him. Maybe they don't want to re-sign him. Maybe, and then, it's just like it's just a way for Jerry Jones at home to like press a button and then see his name on ESPN.
I mean, it's hilarious, but it feels true, Ross.
It does.
The team is so boring. They truly, through their own football team and their own potential moves, they have no paths forward. They're so boring that all they can do is float out rumors themselves about players they might trade on their roster just to get their names in. And at Jerry Jones's stage, he may have just given up on trying to make this team a true winner at this point and just said, I just want to be relevant on my way out.
It reminds me, and look, this isn't the first time we've seen this offseason, right? It reminds me of like, look over here, Deion Sanders, Brian Schottenheimer, right?
Yeah.
And so he's doing the magician role of like, look over here, bang, here's this thing. You know what I mean?
O-line in the draft.
Right, right, exactly. Like that's
trade
exactly
Michael
what this is
Parsons,
going to be.
Offensive line in the first round.
And so that's what I'm expecting to see, because it's what we've seen from Jerry Jones all offseason so far. Even going back to the whole like being on the radio station that's like the team, not the team's radio station, but is like the partner station, and threatening to fire people so that he could make that the thing instead of the Mike McCarthy thing and stuff like that. Like, we've been watching him do this all offseason, and it's just not a secret anymore.
Yeah, it has quite of a parallel to other things that we've seen. Jerry Jones at this stage, you hate to be ageist, you know what I mean? But you just wonder,
no.
Like, we all have our time where we need to relax and enjoy. And, like, I don't know if my mom needs to be driving anymore. Like, I love you, Mom. I love you so much. But, that was a stop sign back there, like, this is dangerous. So shout out to my mom. But
I love your mom getting a shout out on the podcast. Yeah, that's great.
We don't want to be rude, but there are definitely circumstances where we have to take certain things into consideration. And I don't know, it's just a shock to see Dallas be this boring for real.
Yeah, it's so out of the ordinary. Like, the fall from grace is immense, wild, inescapable. It's crazy.
Yeah, I like to think of the Cowboys like myself. Good, bad, but always entertaining. Anyway, with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. Thanks for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft with my guys Damian Parson, Keith Sanchez. They are truly some of the best doing it. It's draft season, folks. You want to be as informed and as intelligent as possible, and that's only going to happen at Locked On NFL Draft. So now that the season's over, make sure you get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Mastermind, Ross Jackson. Thanks for tuning in to Locked On NFL. And as I tell you every episode, stay safe out there.